Montana Territory, spring of 1882, the wind carried dust and silence through the town of Dry Creek as Adelaide Lorne stepped off the stagecoach, clutching a small carpetbag and nothing else in the world. She stood alone at the edge of the platform, boots still caked in Nevada sand, eyes scanning a town that hadn't asked her to come. Her dress was clean but plain, her hands red from scrubbing floors every stop of the way. No one came to meet her, no one ever did. A man in a brown vest checked his list, barely glancing at her. "You got someone here for you?" "No," Adelaide said. He nodded like that settled something. "Then you'll want the boarding house up the hill. Miss Rowena takes in girls like you." Usually? It was that usually that told her everything. She walked uphill anyway, the sun slanting down on her shoulders. The boarding house looked friendly enough, green shutters, white curtains in the windows, but when she knocked, the woman who answered barely opened the door. "You're the one come from Carson City?" the woman asked, eyes sharp. "Yes, ma'am. You got family here?" "No, ma'am." The door didn't open any wider. "I only take girls who got someone to vouch. Husband, father, you understand?" Adelaide nodded. She understood. She had neither. By nightfall, she was sitting on the back steps of the Mercantile, the only place left with an awning to keep the wind off. Her stomach ached from hunger, and her fingers trembled from cold and shame. She was 22, alone, and not a soul in Dry Creek gave a damn. Until a voice cut through the dust. "You looking to freeze out here?" She looked up. The cowboy wore a trail coat and a battered hat pulled low, his boots dusty from a long ride. He had a scar on his jaw and a calm look in his eyes like nothing could shake him. He was maybe 30, maybe older. It was hard to tell with men who'd spent years in the sun. "I know, I just needed somewhere to," her voice cracked, and she hated that it did. He stepped off his horse and tied the reins to the post. "You got a name?" "Adelaide Lorne." He nodded once. "Yates Darnell." He looked down at her like he was weighing something. "You hungry?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Then come on." He turned and walked toward the saloon like there was no question she would follow. Inside, the air was warm. The piano had long gone quiet, but the fire still burned. Yates steered her to a corner table and waved the barkeep over. "Hot stew and bread, strong coffee, make it quick." The food came fast. Adelaide hadn't eaten all day, and she tried to pace herself, but Yates caught the way her hands shook. "You've been traveling long, since winter," she said. "Left Carson City in January, went east looking for work, got turned away at every stop." He leaned back, letting her eat. "No family," she shook her head. "No husband?" "No, and the boarding house turned you out for that. They said women without family bring trouble." He nodded slowly. "That sounds about right." She looked at him then. "Why are you helping me?" Yates sipped his coffee. "Because I got 2 kids on my ranch who have not had a mother in years, because I know what it is to lose everything. And because I do not believe folks should freeze alone in the dirt just because they have no one." Adelaide blinked. "Your wife died birthing our youngest. That was 5 years ago." She looked away, unsure what to say, but he was not done. "You come stay at the ranch. I got a spare room and work if you want it. It is not charity. I need help with the house, and the boys need someone who does not ride off before breakfast." "Why me?" He stood, tossing coins on the table. "Because you are still standing," he said. "And because maybe you need a family as much as we do." She followed him out into the night, the stars sharp above them. The horse was tied where he left it, and he helped her into the saddle before swinging up behind her. The ride to the ranch was quiet. His arms never touched her, but she felt steadied by his presence. The land opened up wide under the moonlight, hills rolling like waves. By the time they reached the house, her eyes were heavy, and the wind no longer felt cruel. Yates helped her down at the porch. The house was simple but solid timber, stone chimney, lanterns glowing in the windows. "Boys are asleep," he said. "You will meet them in the morning." He opened the door and led her inside. The warmth hit her like a blanket. A braided rug ran across the wooden floor and the fire crackled in the hearth. He pointed to a narrow hallway. "Room at the end. Sheets are clean. If you need anything, knock." Adelaide stood there a moment, feeling the heat on her skin, the quiet hum of a house that still had life in it. She turned to him. "Thank you." Yates looked at her for a long beat. "Now you have got mine." She stared at him. "My what?" she asked softly. He nodded once. "Family." Then he turned and walked down the hallway, his boots quiet on the floor. Adelaide closed the door to her room and leaned against it. The bed was small but clean. There was a window that looked out over the pasture and a soft quilt folded at the end. She sat down slowly, letting it all settle in. She had no husband, no parents, no kin, but tonight she had warmth. A roof and maybe, just maybe, a place to belong. The rooster called before the light reached the hills. Adelaide lay still for a moment, staring at the plank ceiling, the edges of sleep tugging at her, warm under the quilt. Then she remembered where she was. She rose. The wash basin on the dresser held water gone cool overnight. She splashed her face, braided her hair, and buttoned her bodice with steady fingers. The mirror showed a woman not quite rested, but not broken either. When she stepped into the kitchen, the smell of wood smoke and oats met her. A kettle hissed on the stove. Yates stood near the door, pulling on his gloves, his coat already buttoned. Two boys sat at the table, one just tall enough to swing his feet, the other with a freckled nose and a wary stare. Yates looked up. "Morning," Adelaide nodded. "Morning," the younger boy pointed a spoon at her. "You the lady Pa brought home?" Yates gave a sharp look, but Adelaide only smiled faintly. "I suppose I am. I'm Thomas," the boy said. Easily, he don't talk much to strangers. He stared down into his porridge, jaw tense. Yates reached for his hat. "I need to check the north fence line. Thomas, you'll stay close to the house. Illy, finish your chores. Adelaide, I'll tend the wash," she said, already rolling up her sleeves. He paused, then nodded. "Barrel's full, soap's under the bench. Holler if the wind kicks up." The door shut behind him. Adelaide worked in silence. The laundry pot boiled over the fire pit behind the house, and she stirred the shirts and trousers with a wooden paddle, steam curling around her face. Her arms ached, but the rhythm steadied her. By mid-morning, the clothes were pinned on the line, snapping in the wind, and she was scrubbing the kitchen floor on her knees when Ellie appeared in the doorway. He held a bucket of eggs. "You missed one," he said, setting them on the table. She stood slowly, brushing her hands on her skirt. "Did I?" He pointed toward the coop. "Hen's broody, won't let me near her." Adelaide tilted her head. "You want me to try?" He shrugged, but the challenge was there. She followed him outside, boots sinking into the soft dirt. The sun had broken through fully now, casting long shadows across the yard. The chicken coop stood behind the shed. Inside, feathers stirred as she crouched. The hen in question fluffed up, clucking low in warning. Adelaide didn't flinch. She reached in slowly, murmuring under her breath, and slipped her hand beneath the bird. A moment later, she held up a warm brown egg. Illy blinked. "Sometimes it just takes patience," she said, slipping it into the pocket of her apron. He didn't answer, but when he turned to go, his shoulders had eased. That afternoon, Adelaide found herself in the garden behind the barn, kneeling in the dirt with a trowel. Weeds had crept in over time, and she worked them out one by one, careful not to disturb the early spring shoots. The soil here was different from Nevada, richer, darker. It smelled of growth. Thomas came running around the corner, breathless. "Come see, Pa's back." She stood, brushing her skirt, and followed him to the gate. Yates rode in slow, a coil of wire slung across his saddle. His eyes met hers, and he gave a short nod. "No breaks," he said. "Just where from the storm last week." Adelaide reached for the bridle as he dismounted. "I can rub him down if you like." He hesitated, then handed over the reins. "He'll like that." "Name's Dalton." As she led the horse toward the trough, she felt Yates's gaze follow her, not heavy, just aware. That evening, after the boys had gone to bed and the wind had died down, they sat on the porch. The lantern between them cast soft light on the boards, and the sky above stretched wide and dark. Yates leaned back in the rocking chair, arms folded. "They took to you quicker than I expected." Adelaide wrapped her shawl tighter. "Thomas is easy. Ellie's careful, but he listens." He looked at her sidelong. "You understand boys. I helped raise my brother before he died. He was only 7. She paused. "Fever took him." The chair creaked under his weight. "You miss Carson?" "No," she said quietly. "There wasn't anything left for me there." A coyote called in the distance. "You planning to stay long?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "If you'll have me." He was quiet a long time. "I've had ranch hands pass through. Some lasted a month, some less." "But you don't look like you run." Adelaide turned toward him. I don't. The wind stirred her hair loose from the braid. Yates studied her face, his own unreadable. I'm not a man who talks much, he said, but I see what's in front of me. She didn't look away. Then see me as someone who knows how to stay. He nodded once. Inside the house, a floorboard creaked and Thomas mumbled in his sleep. Adelaide stood, gathering the shawl around her shoulders. I'll check on him, she said. Yates didn't stop her. She passed through the door, the warmth of the house wrapping around her again. Behind her, the porch settled back into quiet. The river thawed in early April. Ice cracked and drifted downstream, pulling branches and last year's leaves with it. Adelaide stood at the edge of the water, skirt hitched above her boots, rinsing the last of the soap from Ellie's shirt. The cold bit her wrists, but the sun was high, and the air no longer carried winter's edge. Behind her, Thomas shouted from the slope, chasing a stick that had gotten away in the current. His laughter echoed through the cottonwoods. Adelaide smiled, wringing out the fabric, her muscles remembering the rhythm of work without complaint. She no longer flinched at the wind or hesitated at the door. The ranch had settled into her bones. Yates had spent the last 2 days in the far pasture breaking a stubborn gelding. He returned that evening with a limp and a streak of blood drying along his temple. What happened? She asked, stepping off the porch as he led the horse toward the corral. He didn't like the saddle, Yates said, voice even. Adelaide took the reins from his hand. And your head, he got in one good kick before quitting, you need stitches. He gave a slow shake of his head, just a gash, I've had worse. She didn't answer, only turned and walked toward the house. He followed, silent. Inside, she lit the lamp and brought out the tin of carbolic and a clean rag. He sat on the edge of the kitchen chair without protest, and she stood over him, dabbing at the wound with steady hands. He winced once but didn't pull away. You should have had someone with you, she said. Didn't figure I'd need it. That's not the same as being right. He met her eyes then, and something settled between them. He didn't argue. Her fingers brushed his jaw as she folded the cloth, and he caught her wrist lightly. You always this sure of what's needed, she looked down at his hand. Only when someone's too stubborn to care for himself. He let go, but not before his thumb passed once along the inside of her wrist. The touch stayed with her long after he went back out to bed down the horses. That night, after the boys had gone quiet, she sat by the fire and mended a tear in Ellie's trousers. The fire popped now and then, and the clock ticked softly on the mantel. She didn't hear Yates come in until his shadow stretched across the floor. You should rest, he said. She didn't look up. I sleep better when things are in order. He leaned against the doorframe. I've noticed, she kept sewing, you don't ask many questions. No cause to. You do what you say you will. That's enough for me. She tied off the thread and bit it clean. I've been waiting for someone to look at me like that. He stepped closer. You've been seen wrong for too long. Adelaide folded the trousers and set them aside. There's a girl in town, Miriam. She said no one lasts out here, that you send them packing. Yates stared into the fire. They wanted a rancher's name, not the life. You've never asked for either. I'm not afraid of work, I know. Silence stretched between them, warm and full. Adelaide stood, smoothing her skirt. You trust me with your boys, I do, with your home. He nodded once. She stepped closer. What about your heart? Yates's eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd arrived, they didn't carry distance, only heat and gravity. You've had that, he said, since the night you climbed into my saddle. She didn't speak, only reached up, fingers brushing the edge of his collar. He bent then, his forehead touching hers, breath warm between them. I won't run, she said, I know. The fire crackled behind them as he drew her close, one hand resting at the small of her back, careful and sure. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, soft and steady. And for the first time in years, Adelaide Lorne felt claimed not by pity or need, but by choice. By mid-May, the cottonwoods behind the barn had gone thick with green, and the creek ran clear with meltwater. The days came longer and the work bore down heavier, but Adelaide didn't mind the weight of it. She rose before the boys, kept the house in order, and helped with the calves when the branding began. The rhythm of the ranch was hard-earned, but it held her steady. One afternoon, she found Ellie crouched by the henhouse, holding a length of twine and a small wooden carving. She approached slow, crouching beside him in the dirt. "What's that you've got?" He didn't look up. "A whistle." She watched his fingers work the twine through the carved loop. "You make it," he nodded once. "It's good, clean lines." Ali hesitated, then passed it to her. "You can keep it." She turned it over in her hands, feeling the small notches, the careful polish. "Thank you." He stood and brushed his knees. "You're the first one I gave one to." Adelaide watched him walk off, the whistle warm in her palm. Later, she placed it on the shelf above the hearth, beside the stub of beeswax candles she'd kept from her first night there. That evening, Yates came in dusted from the west field, his shirt damp at the collar. He poured water from the basin and scrubbed the back of his neck, then leaned against the counter, watching her stir the pot over the stove. "I got word from town," he said. She didn't turn. "Bad news. Depends. The mill's short a hand. They're asking if I can spare one for a few weeks." She looked over her shoulder. "You thinking of sending Ali?" He shook his head. "Too young. I was thinking of going myself." Adelaide set the spoon down. "You'd leave the ranch just for 6 days, maybe 7. Ride in, help them haul through the backlog, ride back." She wiped her hands on her apron. "And what would you want me to do?" He met her eyes. "Keep this place steady. Keep the boys fed, the horses watered, and the kitchen from going to hell." She crossed her arms. "You trust me with all that?" "I already do." She leaned against the stove. "When do you leave?" "First light." He stepped forward then, close enough she could smell the pine from his coat. "I've never left them with anyone before," he said, voice low. "I've never been asked to hold something that mattered." "You're not holding it," he said. "You're part of it." She felt the words settle deep. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded square of cotton. "For your hair. The sun's getting sharper." She took it, fingers brushing his. "You always this thoughtful with your ranch hands." He looked down at her. "Never had one like you." The next morning he was gone before the sky lightened. Adelaide stood on the porch in his absence, tying the cloth around her braid, her breath visible in the pale dawn air. He came out without prompting, boots already laced. Thomas followed, chewing a crust of bread. They didn't ask where their father had gone. They simply looked to her. By the third day, the pump handle stuck, and the water came up muddy. Adelaide hauled buckets from the creek, showing Thomas how to balance the yoke across his shoulders. That night, she sharpened the kitchen knife on a flat stone and taught Ali how to hold it steady when cutting meat. He nodded once, absorbing it without remark. On the 5th day, a storm rolled in from the west, flattening the wheat rows and sending the chickens into a frenzy. Adelaide barred the shutters and stoked the fire high. The boys huddled near her as the wind howled. She read to them from the worn almanac, voice steady over the racket. When Yates returned the next morning, soaked through and bone tired, he found the house warm, the porch swept, and the boys out back chasing a kite Adelaide had fashioned from oilcloth and a broken rake. He stood in the doorway, watching the 3 of them run, the wind lifting the kite in wild loops. Adelaide turned first, her braid caught by the breeze, her face lit with laughter. "You're back," she said. "I am." Ali ran past, shouting, "We fixed the pump." Yates raised an eyebrow. "Did you now?" Thomas chimed in, and she made a pie with no sugar, said it was just as good. He looked at her, quiet now. "Storm hit hard," she nodded. "Roof held, chickens didn't." He smiled, then stepped down into the yard. "Boys," he said, "go fetch your boots off the fence. I've got something in my saddlebag for each of you." They tore off, whooping. Adelaide stood still as he approached. He stopped a pace from her. "Anything break without me?" "No, we managed." "I can see that." He reached into his coat again, pulled out a small parcel wrapped in brown cloth. "For you." She unfolded it. Inside was a tin brooch shaped like a swallow in flight. "I saw it in the mercantile," he said. "Figured it belonged here now." Adelaide looked at him, her throat tight. "I've spent years patching things alone," he said, hoping the boys wouldn't see how thin the seams were getting. "They see more than you think. They see you now, and they don't flinch." She pinned the brooch to her collar. "Neither do you." Yates stepped closer. "You belong here, Addie, not just because you stayed. Because this place breathes easier with you in it." She reached up, resting her palm against his chest. "Then let's stop pretending it's anything less than that." He pulled her in then, slow and certain, and kissed her under the wind-washed sky, the kite still wheeling above them. The house behind them stood strong, the fence mended, the boys laughing. And for the first time in years, nothing was missing. By early June, the wild iris bloomed along the fence line, lavender petals bright against the prairie grass. The air had turned thick with warmth, the sun no longer a kindness but a weight, and the ranch moved slower beneath its pull. Adelaide spent her mornings with a damp cloth tied around her neck and a wide-brimmed hat shading her brow, weeding the garden rows as Thomas handed her seed packets one at a time. She'd begun marking the days in a small ledger tucked in the kitchen drawer, not with words, but with symbols. A star for moments that felt like something new had taken root. That ledger grew more full than she'd expected. One afternoon, Yates rode out to the far ridge with Ali to check on an ailing calf. Adelaide stayed behind with Thomas, kneading dough near the open door where the breeze could find them. He perched on a stool beside her, swinging his heels. "Is this what mothers do?" he asked, watching her flour the board. She kept her hands moving. "Some do." "What else do they do?" She paused, then wiped her hands and crouched beside him. "They listen, they teach. They hold fast when things get hard." He leaned into her side. "You do all that." She didn't speak, only pressed a hand to his back, steady and sure. Near sundown, Yates returned with Ali trailing behind, both of them dusty and sun-tired. The boy headed straight for the pump, while Yates lingered near the porch, his eyes on her still floured hands. "Calf won't make it," he said, voice low. Adelaide nodded, brushing her palms on her apron. Illy didn't say a word the whole ride. She stepped down from the porch and passed him the basin of cool water. He washed without speaking, his shoulders tight. Later, after supper had been cleared and the boys tucked in, she found Yates at the edge of the pasture, watching the stars come in. "The boy's holding something," he said, arms crossed over the top rail. "He's not ready to let you see it yet." Yates glanced over. "How do you know that?" "Because he doesn't know where to set it down." He looked at her then, his jaw tight with something older than the day. "I've tried to do right by them, keep the land steady, the meals warm." "You've done more than most," he shook his head, "but I can't give them what they lost." She stepped closer, touching his forearm. "No one can, but you've kept the door open." "That's more than enough." He turned, his face inches from hers. "And what about you? What about me? Is this what we're building enough for you?" She looked up at him, the breeze catching the loose strands of her hair. "I didn't come here looking to be rescued. I came because I was tired of being forgotten, but I'm not forgotten here." His hand came to rest at her waist, thumb brushing the curve of her hip. "You're not something I ever planned, Addie." She leaned into him, voice soft. "That's how you know it's real." He kissed her then, slow and certain, the grass bending around them. The summer deepened. Illy began carving again, small animals and fence posts, his quiet broken only when he asked Adelaide, without looking up, if she'd ever lost someone who mattered. She told him the truth. After that, he started asking her to look over his work before he sanded it. Thomas followed her everywhere, asking questions, offering her wildflowers, leaving folded drawings by her bedside. One Sunday in late July, Yates rode to town with all three of them. Adelaide wore her best dress, the one with the hem she'd let down herself, and the silver swallow pinned at her collar. They stood before the preacher in the small clapboard church, the sun painting slants of light through the windows. The boys stood on either side, solemn in shirts too stiff for ranch work, their eyes wide. Yates didn't speak more than he had to, just took her hand and held it steady while the words were said. Afterward, Thomas tugged her sleeve. "Does this mean you're really ours now?" She crouched beside him. "It means I'll never leave." He didn't speak, just nodded once, his hand slipping into hers. That evening, the house filled with neighbors and ranch hands, the long table set with everything Adelaide had baked over the last 2 days. Laughter echoed off the rafters, lanterns swinging in the breeze. Music drifted in from 2 fiddles, and Yates pulled her into a slow turn beneath the stars, his hand warm at her back. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice low. She smiled up at him. "I've never been more certain of anything." He leaned down, his lips brushing her temple. "Then let's grow old in this place, you and me." "We already started," she said, resting her head against his chest. "Years past. The ranch grew with them more cattle, a second barn, a garden that never failed them. Ellie took to the forge and built out a smithy behind the shed. Thomas rode fence before he was 15 and talked of buying land of his own one day. And Adelaide, who'd arrived with nothing but a carpetbag and a quiet kind of grit, came to be known across the valley as the woman who'd rooted herself in dust and grown something lasting. In the evenings, she sat beside Yates on the porch, her hand in his, the soft hum of crickets rising from the grass. They didn't need to speak much. The silence between them was full, and in that silence there was peace. Earned, honest, whole.